Caleb Morgan stood frozen in the hospital parking lot, his phone pressed against his ear, Hannah's trembling voice cutting through the static. "He's here. My ex found me." For a man who'd spent 3 years building walls around his heart, protecting his daughter, protecting himself, this moment changed everything. The blind date he almost skipped. The woman who made silence feel like home. The past that refused to stay buried. This is the story of how a single father learned that love isn't about avoiding risk. It's about showing up when everything tells you to run. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The morning started in the way most Sundays did for Caleb Morgan, with the smell of burnt toast and the sound of small feet thundering down the wooden stairs of his cabin. "Daddy, Daddy, you promised pancakes!" Caleb looked up from the kitchen counter where he'd been nursing his second cup of coffee, still wearing the same flannel shirt he'd thrown on at dawn. His daughter Mia, 6 years old with wild brown curls that refused any attempt at taming, stood in the doorway wearing mismatched socks and a tutu over her pajamas. "I promised pancakes if you cleaned your room," Caleb corrected, though his smile betrayed him. "Did you clean your room?" Mia's face scrunched in concentration. "I cleaned the visible parts." "The visible parts?" "The parts you can see when you stand in the doorway." Caleb laughed despite himself, setting down his mug and reaching for the flower. "That's called strategic avoidance, kiddo. I use the same technique with your Uncle Derek when he tries to set me up on dates." "What's a date?" "Something your dad doesn't have time for," Caleb muttered, pulling out the mixing bowl. But even as he said it, his phone buzzed on the counter. Derek's name flashed across the screen, followed by a text that made Caleb's stomach drop. "Still on for 2 p.m. She's confirmed." "Don't bail on me, brother." Caleb had forgotten. Or rather, he'd been trying to forget for the past 3 weeks, ever since Derek and his wife Rachel had cornered him at a family barbecue, insisting with annoying persistence that he needed to get back out there, as if out there was a place Caleb had any interest in visiting. "Not happening," Caleb texted back while Mia climbed onto a kitchen stool, watching him with the intense focus she usually reserved for cartoon villains. Derek's response came immediately. "You promised. Rachel already told her you'd be there. Lakeside Cafe, 2 p.m. Wear something without sawdust on it." Caleb glanced down at his jeans. There was definitely sawdust. There was always sawdust. When you ran a custom carpentry business from a workshop attached to your house, sawdust became less of a hazard and more of a lifestyle. "Who's texting you?" Mia asked, swinging her legs. "Uncle Derek being annoying. Is he trying to make you go on a date again?" Caleb paused mid-whisk. "How do you even know about that?" "I heard Aunt Rachel talking to Grandma. She said you're going to die alone with cats if you don't start trying." "I don't even like cats," Caleb protested, "and I'm not going to die alone. I've got you." Mia considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. "But I'm going to grow up and move away. That's what kids do." "Then you'll be alone. Probably with cats you don't even like." Caleb stared at his daughter, momentarily stunned by her 6-year-old logic. When had she gotten so insightful? When had she started thinking about him growing old alone? "Pancakes," he said finally, pouring batter onto the griddle with more force than necessary. "We're talking about pancakes, not my theoretical future with hypothetical cats." But the damage was done. As Mia chattered on about her upcoming school week, Caleb found himself glancing at the clock. 9:47 a.m. 4 hours and 13 minutes until he was supposed to meet a woman whose name he couldn't even remember. Hannah? Helen? Something with an H. He'd said no 3 times. Derek had persisted 4. The problem with having a brother who'd pulled you out of the darkest year of your life was that you owed him, even when what he asked for felt impossible. 3 years ago, Caleb's ex-wife had decided motherhood wasn't for her. No warning, no gradual decline, just a note on the kitchen table and her keys left in a bowl by the door. "I can't do this anymore. She's better off with you." Mia had been 3, old enough to ask where mommy went, young enough to eventually stop asking. Derek had shown up that first week with groceries, a toolbox, and a plan to convert Caleb's detached garage into a proper workshop. "You need something to do with your hands," he'd said, something other than scrolling through her social media at 2 in the morning. He'd been right. The carpentry had saved him. given him purpose beyond the immediate needs of a heartbroken toddler. Within a year, Caleb had built enough custom furniture pieces to start charging real money. Within 2, he'd quit his construction job entirely and gone freelance. The work was irregular, the income unpredictable, but it was his. And it meant being home when Mia needed him. Dating, relationships, romance, those belonged to a version of himself he'd packed away like winter clothes in spring. He didn't miss them, mostly. "Daddy, they're burning," Caleb snapped back to the present, flipping the pancakes just in time to save them from total ruin. "Close call." "You're distracted," Mia observed, accepting her plate with the maple syrup already in hand. "Are you thinking about the date?" "I'm not going to the date." "Uncle Derek will be sad." "Uncle Derek will survive." "Aunt Rachel will be really sad." "Aunt Rachel is emotionally resilient." Mia took a huge bite of pancake, syrup dripping down her chin. "I think you should go." Caleb froze with his own fork halfway to his mouth. "You do?" "Mm-hmm." She swallowed, then fixed him with those enormous brown eyes that could sell ice to penguins. "You get lonely sometimes. I can tell." "I'm not lonely. I have you." "I know, but sometimes when I'm asleep, I hear you walking around downstairs, and sometimes you sit on the porch for a really long time just looking at nothing." She paused, her voice going softer. "It's okay if you want someone to talk to, someone who's not 6. Caleb set down his fork, his throat suddenly tight. How did she do this? How did this tiny human who still believed in the tooth fairy somehow see straight through every defense he'd built? "The lady might be nice," Mia continued, encouraged by his silence. "And if she's not, you can just leave. That's what Aunt Rachel said. She said dating is like trying on shoes. Sometimes they don't fit and you have to keep looking." "Aunt Rachel talks too much." "She really does," Mia agreed cheerfully. Caleb looked at his daughter, at her hopeful expression, her syrup-sticky fingers, her absolute certainty that the world was a place where things could work out if you just tried. When had he become the cynic, and she the optimist? "Tell you what," he said slowly, "I'll think about it." "That means yes." Adults always say, "I'll think about it," when they mean yes, but don't want to admit it yet. That's disturbingly accurate. Mia grinned, victorious, and returned her attention to her pancakes. By 1:30 p.m., Caleb had run out of excuses. He'd cleaned his workshop twice. He'd returned 3 client emails that could have waited until Monday. He'd reorganized his lumber rack by wood type and grain pattern, a task so unnecessary that even he recognized it as pure avoidance. Mia was at his parents' house for the afternoon, because apparently this setup had been a family-wide conspiracy. His mother had actually ironed a shirt for him, leaving it hanging on the back of the kitchen door with a note, "Be yourself." But maybe not the version of yourself that wears the same flannel for 3 days straight. Love, Mom. Now, standing in front of his bathroom mirror in dark jeans and the ironed blue button-down, Caleb barely recognized himself. When was the last time he dressed for anything other than work or Mia's school events? When was the last time he'd cared what he looked like? "This is insane," he told his reflection. "You're 32, not 17. You can handle coffee with a stranger." His reflection looked unconvinced. Caleb grabbed his truck keys before he could change his mind, locking the cabin behind him and climbing into the old Ford that had seen better decades. The drive to Lakeside Cafe took 12 minutes. 12 minutes he spent mentally rehearsing conversation topics and immediately discarding them. "So, what do you do?" "No, too generic." "Come here often?" "Absolutely not. I have a 6-year-old daughter and emotional availability issues. How about you?" The cafe appeared around the bend, a small renovated boathouse perched at the edge of Mirror Lake. Summer tourists loved it. Locals tolerated it. Caleb had been there exactly once, for a client meeting 2 years ago, and remembered mainly that they charged $7 for coffee that tasted like burnt water. He parked in the gravel lot, killed the engine, and sat there like an idiot while his heart rate climbed. Through the cafe's wide windows, he could see the Sunday afternoon crowd, couples sharing pastries, families with small children, a few solo laptop warriors camping at corner tables. And standing just outside the entrance, checking her phone with a posture that suggested she was exactly as thrilled about this as he was, stood a woman Caleb assumed had to be his blind date. Hannah, he remembered suddenly. Her name was Hannah. She was older than he'd expected, early 40s maybe, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and a face that seemed naturally arranged into an expression of calm competence. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, nothing flashy, nothing trying too hard. She looked real, like someone who'd show up to help you move furniture or bail you out of jail at 2 a.m., then make you explain yourself over terrible diner coffee. Caleb's phone buzzed. Derek? Rachel just texted Hannah. She says you're late. Get in there. Right. Late. He was late because he'd been sitting in his truck having an existential crisis like a coward. Caleb forced himself out of the Ford, locked it, and started walking toward the cafe entrance before his brain could mount a convincing counter-argument. Hannah looked up at the sound of gravel crunching, and their eyes met. For one awful second, Caleb waited for disappointment to flash across her face, the universal, "Oh, it's you" expression that preceded polite excuses and hasty exits. Instead, Hannah's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't judgment either. Recognition, maybe. Or relief. Caleb? She asked. Hannah? That's me. She pocketed her phone, her posture relaxing slightly. I was starting to think you'd bailed. I thought about it, Caleb admitted before he could stop himself. About 17 times in the last hour. Hannah's almost smile became an actual one. Only 17? I'm at 23. Been here since 1:45, but... Something in Caleb's chest loosened. You got here early to stress about it? Seemed more dignified than stressing about it at home. She gestured toward the cafe door. Should we get this over with? That's the most honest thing anyone said to me all week. They went inside together, and Caleb immediately remembered why he'd avoided this place. It was aggressively charming, exposed beams, vintage nautical decorations, a chalkboard menu featuring drinks with names like Misty Morning Mocha and Sunset Lavender Latte. The kind of place that took itself very seriously while pretending to be casual. I hate this place, Hannah said quietly as they joined the line. Thank God, Caleb breathed. I thought it was just me. No, it's objectively terrible. Derek and Rachel love it, though. I think they have shares in overpriced whimsy. Caleb laughed, an actual genuine laugh that surprised him. How do you know Derek and Rachel? Rachel's my cousin, which means I've been getting the "you need to date someone stable" speech for about 2 years now. Hannah studied the menu with the intensity of someone taking an exam. Apparently you're stable. I own power tools and show up on time. The bar is incredibly low. The bar is subterranean, Hannah agreed. I'll take whatever coffee is least likely to have lavender in it. They ordered 2 regular coffees, black, which seemed to personally offend the barista, and found a table in the corner, away from the window where Derek and Rachel had probably stationed surveillance equipment. Caleb sat down across from Hannah, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The silence should have been awkward, should have sent him scrambling for those rehearsed conversation starters he'd practiced in the truck. Instead, it felt okay, like they were both catching their breath after the sprint of showing up. So, Hannah said finally, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug, your brother is very persistent. That's a polite word for it. Rachel used the phrase morally obligated to give you a chance. I think she genuinely believes she's saving your life. She told my 6-year-old I was going to die alone with cats. Hannah's eyebrows rose. You have a 6-year-old? Mia. She's the reason I almost didn't come today. Well, one of the reasons. Single dad's schedule doesn't leave much room for social experiments. He waited for the usual response, the slight withdrawal, the mental recalculation, the subtle shift that said single parent was more commitment than a first date warranted. Instead, Hannah just nodded. Rachel mentioned you had a daughter, didn't mention she was emotionally manipulating you into dating. She told me it was okay to want someone to talk to, someone who's not 6. Caleb took a sip of coffee, which was exactly as bad as he remembered. She's not wrong, but she's also supposed to be in 1st grade, not giving life advice. Smart kid. Terrifyingly so. Hannah smiled, and something about it seemed less guarded now. For what it's worth, I almost didn't come either. I've been divorced for 4 years, and dating feels like trying to remember a language you barely spoke the first time around. How long were you married? 15 years. High school sweethearts, if you can believe it. Thought we'd figured it all out by 23. Hannah's voice stayed even, but Caleb caught something underneath, not quite bitterness, more like resigned observation. Turns out we'd figured out exactly nothing. My ex left when Mia was 3, Caleb heard himself say. Just left. Decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore and walked out. No custody battle, no fighting, she just signed everything and disappeared. He hadn't meant to say it, definitely not within the first 15 minutes, but Hannah didn't flinch, didn't offer empty sympathy or awkward platitudes. She just held his gaze and said, "That's brutal." Yeah. Caleb set down his coffee, surprised by how much lighter he felt having said it out loud to someone who didn't already know. It was. But we're okay now. Mia and me. We've got our rhythm. What kind of rhythm involves dying alone with cats, according to your family? Caleb laughed again. The kind where I work from home, do school drop-offs and pickups, build furniture until midnight, read the same 3 bedtime stories on repeat, and occasionally remember to feed myself actual meals instead of whatever Mia doesn't finish. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also... Caleb paused, trying to find the right words. It's mine, you know? I built it, every piece of it. After everything fell apart, I got to decide what came next. That mattered. Hannah was quiet for a moment, studying him with an expression that reminded Caleb of how Mia looked when she was trying to solve a particularly tricky puzzle. Finally, she said, "Rachel told me you do custom carpentry. What kind of stuff do you build?" And just like that, they were talking. Not performing, not interviewing, just talking. Caleb described his latest project, a dining table commissioned by a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, made from black walnut they'd harvested from their own property. Hannah told him about her job as a library coordinator, organizing community programs and watching budget cuts slowly strangle the things she loved most about the work. People think libraries are dying, she said, a spark of passion breaking through her steady demeanor. They think everything's digital now, so why do we need physical spaces? But you should see the kids who come in after school because it's warm and quiet and their homes aren't. Or the elderly people who show up for computer classes because they're terrified of being left behind by technology. Libraries are about access, to information, to community, to dignity. Caleb found himself leaning forward. That's exactly how I feel about custom work. Anyone can buy furniture from a big box store, but when someone commissions a piece, they're investing in something that'll outlast them. They're creating an heirloom. There's dignity in that too. Exactly. Hannah's whole face had transformed while talking about her work, animation replacing the careful neutrality she'd worn earlier. It's about mattering, about leaving something behind that says you were here and you gave a damn. They talked through their coffee, then through second cups that were somehow even worse than the first. Caleb told her about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about the year after his ex left when building furniture was the only thing that made sense. Hannah described her divorce, the slow erosion of partnership into polite cohabitation, the relief mixed with grief when it finally ended. Everyone kept telling me I should fight for it, she said, staring into her mug, like fighting harder would change the fact that we'd become strangers who shared a mortgage. But sometimes fighting for something just means dragging out the inevitable. My family said the same thing when my ex left, that I should track her down, convince her to stay, do couples therapy. Caleb shook his head. But you can't convince someone to want the life you're building, and trying just makes you smaller. Exactly. Hannah looked up and Caleb saw recognition in her eyes, the kind that came from living through the same essential story with different details. Exactly that. The afternoon light shifted, spilling through the cafe windows in that particular golden way that meant hours had passed without notice. Caleb glanced at his phone, 4:17 p.m. They'd been talking for over 2 hours. I should go, Hannah said, though she made no move to stand. I'm sure you need to get back to Mia. Not until 6. My parents are feeding her dinner and probably filling her head with propaganda about how great this date is going. Is it? Hannah asked. Great, I mean. Caleb considered the question honestly. I came here expecting to survive an hour of painful small talk and then escape with my dignity mostly intact. Instead, he gestured vaguely at the table between them, at the empty coffee cups and the easy conversation. Instead, this, Hannah repeated, and her smile was soft and genuine. Yeah, this is better than I expected, too. They stood, gathering their things with the slightly awkward choreography of two people who weren't quite ready to leave but didn't have an excuse to stay. Outside, the parking lot was bathed in late afternoon sun, the lake beyond it perfectly still. I'm parked over there, Hannah said, pointing to a sensible blue Honda that matched her entire aesthetic. Practical, reliable, unfussy. The Ford truck is me. Caleb nodded toward his distinctly less sensible vehicle. The one that's mostly rust and determination. I like it. It looks like it has stories. It has a check engine light that's been on since 2019 and a heater that works when it feels like it, but yeah, stories too. They stood there in the parking lot and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Reluctance for a moment to end. Not fear, not obligation, just simple reluctance. Would you want to do this again? He asked before his brain could talk him out of it. Not here. Somewhere with better coffee. Or worse coffee. Honestly, the bar is set pretty low at this point. Hannah's smile widened. I'd like that. When works for you? I have Mia most evenings, but she goes to my parents on Thursdays for dinner. Next Thursday? Thursday works. They exchanged numbers, the transaction feeling both monumental and mundane. As Hannah pulled out of the parking lot, she waved through her window, and Caleb waved back like an idiot, standing there until her Honda disappeared around the bend. His phone buzzed immediately. Derek, well? Caleb typed back. Not terrible. Might try again. The response came in seconds. Told you, Rachel's crying. She's actually crying. She says you're welcome. Caleb climbed into his truck, shaking his head. But as he started the engine and headed toward his parents' house to collect Mia, he caught himself smiling at nothing in particular. Maybe Derek had been right. Maybe the bar for not terrible had been set so low that anything approaching pleasant felt revolutionary. Or maybe Hannah was just Hannah. Real and unpolished and willing to sit through terrible coffee to talk about libraries and furniture and the ways people survived being left behind. His daughter was going to be insufferable about this. Worth it, Caleb thought, and turned up the radio. Mia was waiting on his parents' porch when Caleb pulled up, practically vibrating with anticipation. She ran to the truck before he'd even fully parked, yanking open the passenger door with both hands. So? How was it? Did you like her? Are you getting married? Slow down, speed racer. Caleb reached over to buckle her seatbelt as she scrambled into her seat. We had coffee and talked. That's it. But did you like her? Caleb's mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel and wearing an expression of barely contained curiosity. His father stood behind her, pretending to read the newspaper but clearly eavesdropping. She was nice, Caleb called out. Thank you for watching Mia. Nice? His mother looked personally offended. Derek said she's lovely. Rachel said she's perfect for you. Rachel also thinks pineapple belongs on pizza, so her judgment is suspect. Caleb Michael Morgan, don't you deflect with pizza toppings. Gotta go, Mom. Bedtime routine starts in 90 minutes. You know how it is. He was pulling out of the driveway before she could launch into full interrogation mode, Mia giggling in the passenger seat. You're in trouble, she sang. Grandma's going to call you later. Grandma's going to have to leave a voicemail like everyone else. So you did like her. Mia swung her legs, triumphant. Otherwise, you'd just tell Grandma the truth. Caleb glanced at his daughter, this tiny detective who missed nothing. You know what? Yeah, I liked her. She was easy to talk to, real, not trying to be someone she's not. Are you going to see her again? Next Thursday. Mia let out a squeal that probably violated several noise ordinances. I knew it! I knew you just needed to try. Wait until I tell... You're not telling anyone. Can I tell Uncle Derek? Uncle Derek already knows. He probably has a live feed from the cafe hidden in his watch. Can I tell Aunt Rachel? Aunt Rachel definitely already knows. I think she might have been the barista in disguise. Mia dissolved into giggles, and Caleb felt that familiar warmth in his chest. The feeling that meant despite everything, despite single parenthood and loneliness and emotional walls built from necessity, they were okay. He and Mia, they were okay. And maybe, just maybe, okay had room to become something more. The cabin appeared through the trees, small and sturdy and home. Caleb parked in his usual spot, and Mia bounded out, already launching into a detailed plan for what she thought he should wear on the second date. Not the flannel with the hole in the elbow, she was saying as they climbed the porch steps. And you should probably shower before you go this time, not after work. I showered today. Yeah, but you smell like sawdust. Ladies don't like sawdust. Some ladies might like sawdust. It's a very honest smell. Daddy, no. Caleb unlocked the door, flipping on lights and breathing in the familiar scent of wood shavings and old coffee. His workshop table was still covered with the anniversary table project. The walnut was gorgeous, the grain like rivers frozen mid-flow. Can I watch cartoons before bed? Mia asked, already heading for the couch. 30 minutes. Then teeth, pajamas, story time. Non-negotiable. You're such a dad. That is literally my job description. Mia flopped onto the couch, grabbing the remote, and Caleb wandered into the kitchen to figure out what constituted dinner. Leftover spaghetti, probably. Or grilled cheese. The nutritional value of single dad cooking existed on a spectrum from technically edible to actual vegetables involved. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Hannah. Made it home. Thanks for not being weird about the terrible coffee. Same time next Thursday? Caleb typed back. I'll find somewhere that at least knows what coffee beans look like. See you then. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Looking forward to it. Simple words. Nothing poetic, nothing profound. But they settled into Caleb's chest like the first piece of a new project clicking into place. The moment when you realize the design might actually work. Might actually become something real. Daddy, Mia called from the living room. This show is about a girl who builds robots. You'd like it. Caleb pocketed his phone and joined his daughter on the couch, letting her explain the intricate plot of a cartoon he didn't fully understand but pretended to follow. Outside, the sun finished setting over the woods that surrounded their small clearing, and somewhere across town, Hannah was probably settling into her own evening routine. Next Thursday felt both impossibly far away and surprisingly close. For the first time in 3 years, Caleb let himself wonder what came next. Not with anxiety or dread, but with something that felt dangerously close to hope. And hope, he was learning, was harder to ignore than he'd remembered. Thursday arrived faster than Caleb expected, which meant he spent most of Wednesday night second-guessing everything. He'd found a coffee shop in the next town over, a place called Empty Ember and Grain that supposedly roasted their own beans and didn't name drinks after weather patterns. Derek had vetted it personally, which meant he'd driven 40 minutes just to make sure his brother's second date had acceptable caffeine. You're overthinking this, Derek said when Caleb called him at 11 p.m., wide awake despite having a 6 a.m. lumber delivery. It's coffee. You already know you like her. Just show up. What if the first time was a fluke? What if we run out of things to talk about and just sit there in painful silence? Then you sit in painful silence like adults and blame it on the coffee being too hot to drink. Derek's voice softened. Brother, you survived your wife leaving. You built a whole life from scratch. You can handle a second date. Those things aren't remotely comparable. No, but they're both scary, and you did one of them already. Pattern suggests you can do this too. Caleb had hung up feeling marginally better and entirely exhausted. By Thursday afternoon, he'd worked himself into a state that Mia noticed immediately when she got home from school. You're wearing the good jeans, she observed, dropping her backpack in the entryway with the casual disregard for designated hooks that drove Caleb mildly insane. And you smell like the fancy soap from the back of the cabinet. I always smell like soap. You smell like the soap that comes in a box with French words on it. That's special occasion soap. Mia circled him like a tiny fashion consultant. Are you nervous? No. Your voice went up. That means you're lying. When did you become a human lie detector? I'm 6. We notice everything. Mia grabbed his hand, suddenly serious. It's okay to be nervous. Aunt Rachel says first dates are scary and second dates are scarier because you actually care what happens. Caleb crouched down to her level. Aunt Rachel talks to you too much. She says important things, like how you should just be yourself. And if Hannah doesn't like yourself, then she's not the right person anyway. That's actually solid advice. I know, I'm full of solid advice. Mia hugged him quickly, then pulled back. Go. Grandma's picking me up in 10 minutes and she's making lasagna, which means you have time to not be late. I love you, you bossy little human. Love you too, Dad. Don't talk about wood grain for more than 5 minutes. It's boring to people who aren't you. Caleb laughed all the way to his truck. The drive to Ember and Grain took 25 minutes, most of it along back roads that wound through farmland, turning gold in the late October afternoon. Caleb had the windows down despite the chill, trying to settle the nervous energy that had taken up residence in his chest. This was ridiculous. He was a grown man. He'd handled client meetings, parent-teacher conferences, emergency room visits when Mia broke her arm falling off the monkey bars. He could handle coffee with a woman he'd already spent 2 hours talking to. The coffee shop sat on the main street of a town that looked like it had been designed by someone's nostalgic idea of small-town America. Brick storefronts, trees planted at precise intervals, an actual functioning movie theater advertising films from 2 months ago. Ember and Grain occupied a corner building with large windows and simple wooden furniture visible inside. The sign was hand-carved, which Caleb appreciated on principle. He parked across the street and sat there for exactly 30 seconds before forcing himself out of the truck. Through the windows, he could see Hannah already inside, sitting at a table near the back, with a book open in front of her. She wore a dark green sweater and her hair was down this time, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the warm light. Caleb's heart did something complicated and inconvenient. The bell above the door chimed when he entered, and Hannah looked up. Her smile was immediate and genuine, erasing the carefully constructed casualness she'd been projecting with her book. You found it, she said, closing the book and setting it aside. Derek scouted it for me. He takes his brotherly duties very seriously. Caleb slid into the chair across from her. Have you been waiting long? 10 minutes. I'm chronically early to everything. Occupational hazard of running library programs. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. I'm the same way with client meetings. Show up early, double-check measurements, prepare for everything to go wrong anyway. A barista approached, a young woman with purple hair and an impressively complex ear-piercing situation. What can I get you folks? What's good here? Caleb asked. Honestly? Everything. We source from a roaster in Portland, and the owner is psychotically particular about quality. She gestured at the chalkboard menu. The pour-over is excellent if you've got patience, cold brew if you don't, espresso if you need to taste God's judgment in liquid form. Hannah laughed. That's quite a sales pitch. I believe in truth in advertising. Also, I get free coffee, so I've tried everything and have opinions. Pour over, Caleb decided. I've got patience today. Same, Hannah said. 2 pour-overs coming up. Should take about 6 minutes, so get comfortable. She disappeared behind the counter, and Caleb found himself studying Hannah with the kind of attention he usually reserved for wood grain patterns. She looked different from last Sunday, more relaxed maybe, or just less guarded. There was an ease to how she sat, how she met his eyes without that initial wariness. So, Hannah said, how was your week? Long. Good, but long. I finished that anniversary table I told you about, the walnut one. Delivered it Tuesday, and the couple cried when they saw it, which was either very flattering or very concerning. I'm going with flattering. You build something that makes people cry in a good way. You're doing something right. What about you? Any library emergencies? Actually, yes. We had an incident involving a 6-year-old, a bottle of glitter glue, and the entire young adult fantasy section. It took 3 librarians and a janitor to contain the damage. Hannah's eyes sparkled with suppressed laughter. The child was very apologetic and also very proud of what she called her fairy improvement project. That sounds like something Mia would do. Is she into fairy improvements? She's into improvements in general. Last month she decided my workshop needed better organization and labeled everything with a label maker she stole from my mother. Now I have drawers marked Dad's weird screws and wood pieces Dad won't throw away. She's not wrong though, is she? devastatingly accurate, which is the worst part. Their coffee arrived, presented by the purple-haired barista with the ceremony of someone unveiling a minor work of art. Peruvian single origin, medium roast, floral notes with a chocolate finish. Drink it black first, then add whatever you want, but know that I'll judge you. Noted, Hannah said solemnly. They tried it black. It was, Caleb had to admit, significantly better than Lakeside Cafe's lavender disaster. The conversation flowed as easily as it had the previous Sunday, maybe easier now that they'd established baseline compatibility. Hannah told him about growing up in a military family, moving every few years, learning to make friends quickly and let them go just as fast. I think that's why I ended up working in libraries, she said. Books don't move. They're there when you come back. There's comfort in that kind of permanence. Caleb talked about his grandfather, about summer weeks spent in the old man's workshop, learning to read wood like a language. He used to say every piece tells you what it wants to be, you just have to listen. I thought that was sentimental nonsense until I actually started building things. Now I get it. What does wood sound like? Hannah asked, genuinely curious. It's not literal sound, it's more like resistance, flow. You're planning a board and you hit a knot or a grain change, and you can feel it fighting you. That's the wood telling you to work with it, not against it. Caleb paused, aware he was dangerously close to Mia's 5-minute wood grain lecture limit. Sorry, I'm probably boring you. You're not. I like listening to people talk about things they love. You get animated. Your whole face changes. You do the same thing when you talk about libraries. You kind of light up. Hannah's smile turned self-conscious. My ex-husband used to say I cared more about books than people. He meant it as criticism. Sounds like he was threatened by you having passion for something. Maybe. Or maybe I did care more about books. They were safer. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, staring into it like it held answers. People leave. People change their minds. Books just stay. Caleb recognized that particular flavor of hurt, the kind that got baked into how you saw the world. My ex used to say I was too content with simple things, that I didn't want enough from life. What did you want? Exactly what I had. A family, work I cared about, enough money to be stable, time to actually live instead of just survive. He met Hannah's eyes. Apparently, that was boring. That sounds like the opposite of boring. That sounds like knowing yourself well enough to build a life that fits. She wanted adventure, spontaneity, the next big thing. Caleb heard the old bitterness creeping into his voice and consciously softened it. I wanted Thursday night dinners and bedtime stories and building something that lasted. We wanted different lives. Took us 7 years to admit it. 15 for us, Hannah said quietly. We were so young when we got married. 19 and stupid and convinced we'd figured everything out. By 30, we were strangers who'd memorized each other's habits. By 35, we couldn't remember why we'd started in the first place. Do you regret it? Hannah considered the question with the kind of thoughtful deliberation that Caleb was learning was just how she approached most things. I regret staying as long as I did. I regret the years we spent being polite instead of honest. But I don't regret marrying him. We were kids trying to build something permanent when we barely knew who we were. That's not a crime. It just didn't work. That's a healthier way of looking at it than I've managed. Give yourself time. You're what, 3 years out? 3.5. Sometimes it feels like forever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. 4 years for me, and same. Some days I'm completely fine, building a whole life as a single woman, enjoying the independence. Other days I'm furious at how much time I wasted trying to fix something that was broken from the start. Their conversation continued as the afternoon stretched into evening. Other customers came and went, students with laptops, a group of older women who apparently had a standing Thursday knitting circle, a young couple who spent more time looking at each other than their coffee. The purple-haired barista refilled their cups without being asked, winked at Caleb when Hannah wasn't looking. Around 6:30, Hannah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, then silenced it without responding. Everything okay? Caleb asked. Just my mother. She has a sixth sense for when I'm doing something that might lead to happiness and likes to check in with concern disguised as casual questions. What kind of questions? Are you sure you're ready to date? Don't you think you should focus on yourself for a while longer? Remember what happened last time? Hannah's voice took on a slightly bitter edge. She means well. She's just protective to the point of being paralyzing. My family's the opposite. They're aggressively encouraging. Derek literally staged an intervention about my dating life at a barbecue in front of 20 relatives. Which is worse? Honestly, no idea. Both feel invasive in different ways. Hannah's phone buzzed again and again. She turned it face down with more force than necessary. Sorry, I should have silenced it before I got here. You can answer if you need to. I really don't. But her jaw had tightened, and Caleb recognized the signs of someone trying to maintain composure against an incoming stress tide. Want to get out of here? He asked. Go for a walk or something? There's got to be a park in this aggressively quaint town. Hannah's expression cleared with visible relief. Yes, please. They paid, Caleb getting there first despite Hannah's protest, and stepped out into the October evening. The temperature had dropped noticeably, that particular autumn chill that meant winter wasn't far behind. Hannah pulled her sweater tighter, and Caleb fought the urge to offer his jacket like some kind of romantic comedy protagonist. There's a trail along the river, Hannah said, pointing down a side street. If you don't mind a walk. Lead the way. They fell into step together, moving away from the commercial center of town toward a tree-lined path that followed a narrow river. The water moved sluggishly, reflecting the last of the daylight in shades of copper and gray. Fallen leaves covered the path in a carpet of red and gold, crunching satisfyingly underfoot. For a while they walked in comfortable silence. Caleb had noticed this about Hannah. She didn't feel compelled to fill every quiet moment with words. There was a settled quality to her, a lack of nervous energy that made silence feel natural instead of awkward. Can I ask you something? Hannah said eventually. Sure. Why did you actually show up last Sunday? Derek's persistence aside, you could have just kept saying no. Caleb thought about it, about Mia's observation that he got lonely sometimes, about the realization that he'd been in holding pattern for 3 years, about the simple fear that if he didn't try, this would just be his life forever. Good enough, but never quite whole. Mia told me it was okay to want someone to talk to, he said finally, and I realized I'd been telling myself I was fine alone because fine felt safer than risking not being fine. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I told myself the same thing for 2 years, that I was happy single, that I didn't need anyone, that wanting partnership was just social conditioning I could unlearn. Hannah kicked at a pile of leaves, watching them scatter. But the truth is I missed it. Not my ex-husband specifically, but the feeling of being known by someone. Of having a person who gets your references and remembers how you take your coffee and notices when you're quiet because something's wrong versus quiet, because you're just thinking. What changed? What made you say yes to the setup? Rachel's persistence mainly, but also... Hannah paused, choosing words carefully. I realized I was letting my ex-husband's judgment of me become my judgment of myself. He said I was too independent, too set in my ways, too much work for what I offered in return, and I believed him. I structured my whole life around proving I didn't need anyone, which is just another way of letting him win. That's not too independent. That's self-sufficient. There's a difference. Is there? Because from the inside, they feel pretty similar. Self-sufficient means you can handle things alone if you need to. Too independent means you refuse help, even when accepting it would make life better. Caleb stopped walking, turning to face her. You're here, aren't you? On a second date with a guy you barely know? That's not too independent. That's brave. Hannah met his eyes, and something shifted in her expression, a softening, a lowering of defenses. You're good at that. At what? Saying the exact right thing, not the polite thing or the expected thing, just the true thing. I'm a terrible liar. Mia calls me on it every time, so I stopped trying. I like that about you. You're straightforward. No games. I don't have the energy for games. Single parenting uses up all my strategic thinking on battles over vegetables and bedtime. Hannah laughed, and they started walking again. The path curved away from the river, climbing slightly into woods that were dense with the particular magic of autumn twilight. The temperature continued to drop, and Caleb finally surrendered to chivalry, shrugging off his jacket. Here, he said, offering it to her. I'm fine. Hannah, you're shivering. Take the jacket. She took it, pulling it around her shoulders with a small smile. Thank you. You're welcome. They walked deeper into the woods, talking about everything and nothing. Hannah told him about her plan to start a community tool library at work, lending out things like drills and saws to people who couldn't afford to buy them. Caleb got genuinely excited about the idea, offering to help organize it, maybe even teach basic woodworking classes. You do that? Hannah asked. I'd love to. Teaching Mia to use hand tools has been one of my favorite parts of parenting. Watching someone create something with their own hands for the first time, there's nothing like it. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She keeps me human, keeps me from turning into someone who only talks to lumber and power tools. From what I've seen, you talk to people just fine. Only certain people. People who don't expect me to be someone I'm not. Hannah stopped walking, and Caleb stopped too, realizing they'd reached a small clearing where the path intersected with a wider trail. A wooden bench sat under an oak tree, leaves drifting down around it in lazy spirals. Can we sit for a minute? Hannah asked. Of course. They settled on the bench, close enough that Caleb could feel the warmth of her through his jacket she was wearing. The woods were getting darker now, shadows pooling between trees, but there was still enough light to see Hannah's face when she turned to him. I need to tell you something, she said. Caleb's stomach dropped. Here it came. The revelation that she was moving or getting back with her ex, or had suddenly remembered a pet allergy that made dating a carpenter impossible. Okay, he said carefully. I haven't dated anyone since my divorce. Not seriously. A few coffee meetings that went nowhere, one dinner that was so catastrophically bad I left before dessert. But nothing that mattered. She was looking at her hands, fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket. And this matters. I can already tell, which is terrifying. Relief and something warmer flooded Caleb's chest. Terrifying how? Terrifying like I could actually care about this. About you. And caring means risking getting hurt again, and I'm not sure I'm equipped for that. I'm not sure anyone's ever equipped for that. We just do it anyway because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives alone with hypothetical cats. Hannah laughed shakily. Your family really did a number on you with that cats thing. They're persistent. It's their primary character trait. Caleb shifted slightly, closing the small distance between them. For what it's worth, I'm terrified too. I've spent 3 years building walls around anything that feels like vulnerability. You're the first person who's made me want to tear them down. We're a mess, Hannah said softly. We're careful. There's a difference. Is there? Careful means you've learned from getting hurt. Mess means you let the hurt define you. He reached over, gently taking her hand. You're here. That's not a mess. That's trying. Hannah looked down at their joined hands, and Caleb felt her fingers tighten around his. My ex-husband's name is David. He's a financial advisor. Very successful, very charming, very good at making me feel like I was never quite enough. Sounds like an ass. He had his good qualities, but yeah, mostly an ass. She took a breath and Caleb could feel her steadying herself. We run into each other sometimes, small town problems. It's fine, usually. Polite, distant, fine. But every time it happens, I feel like I'm 22 again, trying to be whatever version of myself he needed that day. Has he remarried? Engaged? To someone younger, more social, more everything I apparently wasn't. Good for him. Better for you. Hannah looked up, surprised. How do you figure? Because now he's someone else's problem, and you get to build a life that fits who you actually are, instead of who he needed you to be. That's a very evolved perspective. I've had time to practice, too. Mia asks about her mom sometimes, not often anymore, but sometimes. And I've had to figure out how to explain that people can be wrong for each other without either of them being bad. It's helped me process my own stuff. You're a good father, Hannah said, and the sincerity in her voice made Caleb's throat tight. I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do, right? Just try. They sat there as the last light faded from the woods, hands linked, shoulders touching, not saying anything that needed to be said with words. Somewhere in the distance, Caleb could hear the river, the rustle of leaves, the quiet settling of the world into night. Finally, Hannah stirred. We should probably head back before it gets completely dark. I don't know this trail well enough to navigate by starlight. Probably smart. They stood, still holding hands, and started back the way they'd come. The return walk felt different, easier somehow, like they'd crossed some invisible threshold and come out on the other side changed. When they reached the parking area near Ember and Grain, Caleb walked Hannah to her Honda, reluctant to let the evening end. She unlocked the car but didn't get in, turning to face him in the amber glow of the streetlights. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight. For listening. For not running when I admitted I was terrified. Thank you for being honest. For showing up even when you were scared." Hannah smiled, then did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward and hugged him. Not a polite side hug or a brief social gesture, but a real embrace, her arms around his waist, her head against his chest. Caleb wrapped his arms around her automatically, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. They stood like that for a long moment, and Caleb felt something settle into place inside him. Some piece of himself he hadn't realized was misaligned, clicking back into proper position. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah's eyes were bright. "Same time next week? I'd like that. Though maybe we could do dinner? Actual food, not just coffee?" "Dinner sounds perfect." She got into her car, and Caleb waited until she'd pulled out of the parking lot before walking to his truck. His jacket smelled like her perfume now, something subtle with vanilla and wood notes that suited her perfectly. The drive home took forever and no time at all. Caleb's mind was full of the evening, replaying conversations and silences, the way Hannah had opened up about her ex, the weight of her hand in his. His phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. Derek, of course. "How'd it go?" his brother demanded without preamble. "Good, really good." "That's it? That's all I get?" "I'm seeing her again next week. Dinner this time." "Rachel!" Derek's voice went distant as he shouted to his wife. "He's doing dinner! It's serious!" "It's not serious, it's just dinner. Brother, you don't do dinner. You do quick coffee and efficient exits. Dinner means you're actually trying." Caleb couldn't argue with that logic. "Yeah, okay, I'm trying." "Good. She's good for you, I can tell." "How can you possibly tell? You've never even met her." "Rachel says she's got kind eyes and a good laugh. That's all I need to know." "That's the worst vetting process I've ever heard." And yet here you are, planning a third date. My methods work. Caleb hung up on his brother's laughter and headed inside, where Mia was already asleep in her room, courtesy of his parents' legendary ability to tire out small children through sheer enthusiasm. He checked on her anyway, finding her sprawled diagonally across her bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. "Hey, kiddo," he whispered, adjusting her blankets. "Your advice worked. You were right." Mia didn't wake up, but she smiled in her sleep, and Caleb chose to believe she'd heard him anyway. He headed to his workshop, not ready for sleep yet, still buzzing with the evening's energy. The anniversary table was gone, delivered to its new home, but a new commission waited. A bookshelf for a professor downsizing from a house to an apartment, wanting something custom to hold 40 years of collected wisdom. Caleb ran his hand over the cherry wood, feeling the grain, listening to what it wanted to become. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, the future felt like something he was building toward instead of something he was just surviving. He worked late into the night, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of measuring and cutting and sanding. But even absorbed in the work, part of his mind stayed with Hannah, with her honest eyes and careful words, with the way she'd held his hand like it mattered, with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, careful people could learn to be brave together. Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling the workshop windows and carrying the first real hint of winter. Caleb smiled to himself and kept working, building something that would last. The dinner date turned into weekly dinners, which turned into phone calls that stretched past midnight, which turned into Caleb realizing he was thinking about Hannah during moments that had nothing to do with her. Measuring lumber and wondering if she'd like the grain pattern, reading Mia a bedtime story and imagining Hannah's voice narrating the dragon parts. Drinking morning coffee and remembering how she took hers, black, no sugar, in whatever mug was cleanest. By mid-November, they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt both new and strangely inevitable. Thursday nights were theirs. Dinner at different restaurants they'd researched together, walks even as the weather turned cold, conversations that picked up exactly where they'd left off the week before. Caleb had introduced her to Mia over pancakes one Saturday morning, a meeting he'd stressed about for days until Mia had looked at Hannah and said, "Do you like books about dragons?" And Hannah had said, "I run a library, so yes, professionally." And that had been that. Now it was the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and Caleb was finishing up a rush commission for a client who'd decided 3 weeks before the holiday that they absolutely needed a custom dining table. He was running behind schedule, covered in sawdust, and completely missed his phone ringing until Mia ran into the workshop holding it like a prize. "It's Hannah," she announced. "She's called twice." Caleb grabbed the phone, frowning at the time. 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. Hannah should be at work, running the library's weekend programs. "Hey, is everything okay?" "Hi. Yes. No. Maybe." Hannah's voice sounded off, tight and brittle in a way he'd never heard before. "Are you busy?" "I'm working, but nothing that can't wait. What's wrong?" "Can I come over? I know it's last minute and you've got Mia, but I need to not be alone right now." Caleb was already pulling off his safety goggles. "Of course. Come over. You know where we are." 20 minutes? "I'll be here." He hung up and looked at Mia, who was watching him with those too perceptive eyes. "Is Hannah sad?" she asked. "I think so, yeah." "Are you going to make her feel better?" "I'm going to try." Mia nodded seriously. "We should make her hot chocolate. Grandma says hot chocolate fixes most things that aren't actually broken." That's surprisingly wise advice from someone who puts marshmallows in coffee. Grandma's weird, but she's not wrong. They headed into the house together, Caleb trying to brush the worst of the sawdust off his clothes, while Mia assembled hot chocolate ingredients with the focus of a tiny surgeon. By the time Hannah's Honda pulled into the driveway, they had 3 mugs ready, and Mia had set up what she called a comfort station on the couch. Blankets, pillows, and her stuffed rabbit, because everyone feels better with Mr. Hops. Caleb opened the door before Hannah could knock. One look at her face told him everything. She'd been crying, recently enough that her eyes were still red-rimmed and her makeup was smudged at the corners. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, the kind of outfit that said she'd gotten dressed without thinking about it. "Hey," he said softly. "Hi." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry for just showing up." "Don't apologize. Come in." Hannah stepped inside and Mia appeared immediately with a mug of hot chocolate held carefully in both hands. "This is for you," she said. "It has extra marshmallows because Dad said you sounded sad on the phone." Hannah's expression crumpled and reassembled in the space of a breath. She took the mug, crouching down to Mia's level. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is exactly what I needed. Do you want to sit on the couch? I set up the good blankets." "That sounds perfect." They migrated to the living room, Hannah settling into the corner of the couch, while Mia arranged blankets with the precision of someone who'd clearly learned therapeutic hospitality from Rachel. Caleb sat on the opposite end, close enough to reach, but far enough to give her space, holding his own mug and waiting. "I ran into my ex-husband," Hannah said finally, staring into her hot chocolate like it held answers. "At the grocery store. With his fiancée." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. "What happened?" "Nothing dramatic." "That's almost worse." "He was perfectly pleasant, introduced me to Jessica, commented on the weather, asked how work was going, very civilized, very normal." She took a shaky breath. Yep. "And the whole time, all I could think was how much smaller I felt standing there. Like I was shrinking into this version of myself I thought I'd left behind." "What did he say?" Caleb asked carefully. "It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. That tone he used to use when he was explaining things to me, like I was a slightly dim child who needed extra patience." Hannah's hands tightened around her mug. "He asked if I was still at the library, and when I said yes, he got this look, this sympathetic, slightly pitying look, and said, 'Well, someone has to do it.' Like my job was a consolation prize for people who couldn't do better." "That's completely out of line," Caleb said, anger spiking sharp and immediate. "It's just how he is. How he was. I should be used to it by now." "Being used to it doesn't make it okay." Hannah looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Jessica seemed nice." young but nice. Laughed at his jokes, looked at him like he hung the moon. I wanted to warn her, to pull her aside, and tell her that the charm wears off, that eventually she'll realize she's auditioning for a role in his life instead of building a partnership. But I didn't. I just smiled and said congratulations and bought my groceries like a functional adult. Hannah, and then I got to my car and completely fell apart. The tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks. I sat in the parking lot crying over a man I don't even want anymore, feeling like a failure because I'm 43 and single and apparently still working my consolation prize job while he's moved on to someone who fits his life better. Mia, who'd been sitting quietly on the floor organizing her collection of books about dragons, looked up with concern. "Your job isn't a prize for losing," she said matter-of-factly. "Libraries are important. My teacher says they're where democracy lives." Hannah let out a wet laugh. "Your teacher is very smart." "I know. She has 17 degrees. Mia stood up, walking over to hand Hannah Mr. Hops. "You can hold him if it helps. He's a good listener, and he doesn't judge people." "Thank you, honey." Hannah accepted the rabbit, and something in her face softened. "You're very kind." "Dad says being kind is the most important job there is." Mia looked at Caleb. "Can I go watch cartoons in your room? I think grown-ups need to talk about feelings." "Sure, kiddo. Take your hot chocolate." Mia gathered her mug and left with the dignity of a tiny diplomat, closing Caleb's bedroom door behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed felt heavy and fragile at the same time. Caleb set down his mug and shifted closer to Hannah, not touching yet, but closing the distance. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "I don't know what to say. I feel ridiculous. It's been 4 years. I shouldn't still be letting him get to me like this. He spent 15 years making you feel small. That doesn't just disappear because you signed divorce papers. It should. I've worked so hard to build a life that's mine, to feel confident in who I am without him, and then 10 minutes in a grocery store undoes all of it, and I'm right back to being that woman who wasn't enough." Caleb reached over slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Hannah didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. "I see someone who runs programs that give people access to information they couldn't get otherwise, who stays late to help elderly patrons learn to use email so they can talk to their grandkids, who's building a tool library from scratch because she believes everyone deserves the resources to create things." He squeezed her hand gently. "I see someone who showed up to a blind date terrified and did it anyway, who's honest about being scared instead of pretending to have it all figured out, who makes my daughter hot chocolate and listens to her read picture books even though she can recite them from memory. Caleb, I see someone who's smart and funny and kind, who thinks about things carefully before speaking, who doesn't fill silence with noise just because it's there. Someone who's building exactly the life she wants instead of the life someone else thinks she should have." He turned to face her fully, his voice firm. "And if your ex-husband can't see that, if he needs someone young and agreeable who laughs at his jokes and makes him feel important, that's his failure, not yours." Hannah was crying openly now, but differently, less desperate, more release. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I'm just telling you the truth as I see it. The rest is up to you to believe." She set down her mug with shaking hands and leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. Caleb wrapped his arm around her, holding her while she cried, not trying to fix it or make it better, just being present. Her whole body shook with the force of tears she'd clearly been holding back for hours, maybe longer. "I'm getting your shirt wet," she mumbled against his shoulder. "I've got a 6-year-old. My shirts have survived worse." That surprised a laugh out of her, watery but genuine. They sat like that for a long time, Hannah crying herself out while Caleb held her steady, occasionally murmuring quiet reassurances that seemed inadequate but were all he had to offer. Finally, the tears slowed, then stopped. Hannah pulled back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart on you like that." "Don't apologize. You're allowed to fall apart sometimes. That's what people do. Not me. I'm the steady one, the one who has it together." "Says who?" "Says everyone. My family, my friends, my ex. I was always the stable one, the reliable one, the one who kept everything running smoothly. Falling apart wasn't part of the job description." Caleb studied her, really looked at her, seeing past the surface composure to the exhaustion underneath. That sounds lonely. Hannah's breath caught. It is. It really is. You don't have to be that person with me. You don't have to have it together all the time. You can just be. I don't know how to do that. I've been performing competence for so long, I'm not sure what's underneath anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. No performance necessary. Hannah looked at him with an expression that was part gratitude, part disbelief, part something deeper that made Caleb's heart trip over itself. Why are you so patient with me? Because you're worth being patient with. Because I know what it's like to build walls and forget how to take them down. Because... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Because what? Because I'm falling for you, Caleb said quietly. And I want you to feel safe with me. All of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable to show. Hannah's eyes widened. Caleb, you don't have to say anything back. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, very softly, I'm falling for you too. That's why today hurt so much. Because I was thinking about you while I was standing there with David and Jessica, and all I could think was how much I wanted to call you, to hear your voice, to have you tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt. And that scared me. Needing someone again. Depending on someone. Needing isn't the same as depending. Needing someone means you trust them enough to be vulnerable. Depending on someone means you can't function without them. Big difference. When did you get so wise about relationships? You said you haven't dated since your ex left. I haven't. But I've spent 3 years learning to be vulnerable with Mia, letting her see me scared and frustrated and not always having answers. Turns out that translates to other relationships too. Hannah reached up, touching his face with a tenderness that made Caleb's breath catch. Thank you. For letting me fall apart. For not trying to fix it, or minimize it, or tell me I'm overreacting. You're not overreacting. Someone you spent 15 years with was dismissive and condescending. You're allowed to have feelings about that. I hate that I still care what he thinks. You don't care what he thinks. You care about being treated with basic respect, and he failed to provide that. Different thing. Hannah smiled, small but real. Semantics. Important semantics. They sat in comfortable silence, Hannah's head back on Caleb's shoulder, his arm around her. Outside, the November afternoon was fading into evening, the light going gray and soft through the windows. From his bedroom came the muted sounds of cartoon theme songs and Mia's occasional laughter. She's wonderful, Hannah said quietly. Mia, you're doing an amazing job with her. I'm doing my best. Some days that's enough, some days it's not, and somehow we survive either way. She's confident, kind, emotionally intelligent beyond her years. That doesn't happen by accident. She came that way. I just try not to screw it up too badly. You're too modest. She clearly adores you. The feeling is aggressively mutual. Hannah shifted, sitting up to look at him properly. Her eyes were still red from crying, her face blotchy and makeup smudged, but there was something open in her expression now, a lowering of defenses that felt like trust made visible. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Do you ever worry that we're rushing this? That we're both just lonely and looking for something to fill the gaps our exes left? Caleb considered the question honestly. Sometimes, usually around 3 a.m. when I can't sleep and my brain decides to catastrophize. But then I actually think about it, about how I feel when I'm with you versus how I felt in my marriage, and it's completely different. Different how? With my ex, I was always trying to be enough. Interesting enough, adventurous enough, spontaneous enough. I was performing a version of myself I thought she wanted instead of just being who I was. With you, he paused, finding the words. With you, I'm just me. The guy who gets excited about wood grain and falls asleep reading bedtime stories and thinks a perfect Friday night is building furniture in my workshop, and you don't need me to be anything else. I like who you are. I like that you're steady and present and you think about things before you speak. I like that you're a good father and you care about your work and you're not afraid of silence. I like that you're careful but willing to try, that you're honest about being scared, that you listen more than you talk and you notice things other people miss. Caleb reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I like that you showed up today instead of handling it alone. That matters more than you know. I almost didn't come. I sat in my apartment for an hour convincing myself I was being too needy, too dramatic, too much. You're not too much. You're exactly right. Hannah leaned forward, and Caleb met her halfway. The kiss was soft and tentative, tasting like salt from her tears and chocolate from Mia's careful hospitality. It was nothing like the dramatic first kisses in movies, no fireworks or swelling music, just two careful people choosing to be brave together. When they pulled apart, Hannah was smiling. I've been wanting to do that for weeks. Yeah, but I kept overthinking it, wondering if it was too soon, if I was ready, if you were ready, if Mia would mind. Mia's been asking when I'm going to kiss you since our second date. She's very invested in this relationship. She's 6. She's also apparently a romantic. I blame the Disney movies. Hannah laughed, the sound lighter than anything Caleb had heard from her all afternoon. We're really doing this, aren't we? Dating seriously. Building something real. Looks that way. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, Caleb agreed. Want to be terrified together? Yes, definitely yes. They kissed again, longer this time, and Caleb felt something settle deep in his chest. A rightness he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. This wasn't the desperate passion of early 20s love or the comfortable complacency of long marriage. This was something else entirely. Choice. Intention. Two people who'd been hurt deciding to try anyway. The bedroom door opened, and Mia poked her head out. Are you done talking about feelings? Because I'm hungry and it's almost dinner time. Hannah pulled back, laughing. Yes, honey, we're done. Good. Can Hannah stay for dinner? We're having spaghetti and Dad's sauce is really good, even though he pretends he just dumps a jar. I do just dump a jar. He makes it from scratch, Mia told Hannah seriously. He's modest about his cooking like he's modest about everything else. I'm right here, kid. I know. That's why I'm telling Hannah the truth about you. Someone has to. Hannah was grinning now, all traces of earlier tears gone. I'd love to stay for dinner if that's okay. More than okay, Caleb said, standing and offering her his hand. Fair warning, though. Mia's going to interrogate you about your favorite books, your stance on dragons versus unicorns, and probably your long-term intentions regarding her father. I can handle that. She's relentless. So am I. They moved to the kitchen together, Mia chattering about her day while Caleb started dinner preparations. Hannah offered to help, and they fell into an easy rhythm. Her chopping vegetables while he started the sauce, Mia setting the table with the careful attention she brought to any task she deemed important. Watching them together, Caleb felt something he'd stopped believing in years ago. Hope for a future that was more than just functional, more than just getting through each day intact. A future that included laughter and partnership and someone who saw all of him and chose to stay anyway. Dad, you're staring, Mia said, not looking up from arranging silverware in perfectly straight lines. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Hannah glanced over, catching his eye, and smiled. Not the careful, guarded smile she'd worn on their first date, but something open and genuine that made Caleb's heart ache in the best way. Dinner was chaotic and warm, Mia dominating the conversation with questions about Hannah's work, the library, her favorite books growing up. Hannah answered everything with the patient enthusiasm of someone who genuinely liked children, who didn't see Mia as an obstacle to dating Caleb, but as part of the package, essential and non-negotiable. My friend Emma says her dad's girlfriend pretends to like her, but really just wants to be alone with him, Mia said, twirling spaghetti around her fork with more enthusiasm than skill. But you actually like me, right? You're not just being nice because of Dad. Mia, Caleb started, mortified. It's okay, Hannah said quickly. She set down her fork, giving Mia her full attention. I really like you. You're smart and funny, and you ask good questions. Being nice to you because of your dad would be insulting to both of us. That's what I thought. Mia nodded, satisfied. Emma's dad has bad taste in girlfriends. My dad has good taste. That's why he picked you. I appreciate the vote of confidence. You're welcome. Can I have more garlic bread? The evening stretched into night, Mia eventually retreating to her room to read before bed, while Caleb and Hannah cleaned up together. They worked in companionable silence, Hannah washing dishes while Caleb dried, moving around each other with the ease of people who had done this together for years instead of the first time. "Thank you," Hannah said quietly as she handed him the last plate. "For today. For letting me show up messy and not making me feel like a burden. You could never be a burden. Bad days happen. That's just life. Still, I know I kind of crashed your afternoon. You didn't crash anything. You asked for help, and I'm glad you felt like you could." Caleb set the dried plate in the cabinet, then turned to face her fully. "I meant what I said earlier about falling for you, about wanting you to feel safe being yourself, even the parts that aren't polished or together. I know, that's what scares me. You mean it. Why is that scary? Because if you mean it, I have to mean it back. I have to let myself care about this, about you, about the possibility that this could be real." Hannah leaned against the counter, her expression open and vulnerable. "And if I let myself care that much, it'll hurt that much more if it doesn't work out." "That's true. It will." Caleb stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "But it'll also feel that much better when it does work out. And I think it will, Hannah. I think we're building something real here. Even though we're both kind of a mess. Especially because we're both kind of a mess. We know what we're getting into. No illusions, no unrealistic expectations, just two people trying to build something good together." Hannah studied him for a long moment, and Caleb watched her face as she made some internal decision. Finally, she said, "Okay. Okay. Okay, let's do this. Let's be terrified together and build something real and trust that even if it hurts sometimes, it'll be worth it. Yeah? Yeah." Caleb pulled her into a hug, holding her close and feeling her arms wrap around him with equal strength. They stood like that in his small kitchen, dishwater cooling in the sink, the house settling into evening quiet around them. From her bedroom, Mia called out, "Dad, I need you to sign my permission slip for the field trip." Hannah pulled back, laughing. "Duty calls." "Always." But Caleb didn't let go immediately. "Stay a little longer after I put her to bed? We can just sit and talk, or not talk, whatever you want." "I'd like that." Caleb kissed her forehead and went to handle permission slip logistics, leaving Hannah in the kitchen with a smile on her face and missed her, Hop still tucked under her arm. Later, after Mia was asleep and the house was quiet, they sat together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching stars emerge in the November sky. Hannah told him more about her marriage, about the slow erosion of intimacy and the guilt of leaving even when staying was impossible. Caleb talked about the first year after his ex left, about the panic and loneliness and gradual acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed. "Do you ever miss it?" Hannah asked. Not her specifically, but being married, having a partner. "I miss the idea of it. Coming home to someone who's interested in my day, having another adult to talk to after Mia's asleep. Sharing the weight of decisions instead of carrying everything alone," he paused. "But I don't miss what I actually had, which was performing for someone who'd already decided I wasn't enough. I'd rather be alone than that." "Me too, which is why this is so important. Because for the first time in forever, I'm not alone, but I'm also not performing. I'm just here, with you, being myself." "I like yourself. She's pretty great. She's a work in progress who cries in grocery store parking lots. She's human and real and honest. That's better than great." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, breathing in the cold night air and letting the enormity of what they were building settle around them like snow. Whatever came next, Caleb thought, they'd face it together, messy and scared and trying anyway. And somehow, that felt like enough. The weeks following that November evening shifted something fundamental between them. Hannah started showing up at the cabin more often, sometimes planned but increasingly spontaneous, stopping by after work with takeout or on Saturday mornings with coffee and pastries from the bakery in town. Mia treated these visits as natural extensions of their routine, pulling Hannah into board games and art projects with the unselfconscious ease of a child who'd decided this person belonged. By early December, Caleb realized he was thinking in terms of we instead of I for the first time since his marriage ended. Weekend plans became their plans. Dinner became something they cooked together. Even his workshop, His private sanctuary for 3 years became a place Hannah would sit reading while he worked, the two of them existing in companionable silence that felt more intimate than conversation. But the ease also brought doubt creeping in around the edges. Hannah started second-guessing herself more, apologizing for small things that didn't need apologies, withdrawing slightly when conversations turned toward the future, checking her phone with increasing frequency, and frowning at messages Caleb couldn't see. "Is everything okay?" he asked one Thursday evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Mia was at Rachel's for a sleepover, giving them rare, uninterrupted time together, but Hannah seemed distracted. "Fine. Just work stuff." She scrubbed at a pot with more force than necessary. "Hannah." She stopped, setting down the scrubber and gripping the edge of the sink. "My mother called today." Caleb dried his hands, giving her his full attention. "What did she say?" "The usual. Asking about my life, pretending to be casual, then working around to her actual agenda." Hannah's jaw tightened. "She heard from someone that I'm seeing someone. Wanted to know if it's serious." "What did you tell her?" "That it's none of her business," which she took as confirmation that yes, it's serious, and launched into her concerns. Hannah finally turned to face him. "She thinks I'm moving too fast, that I haven't given myself enough time to heal from my divorce, that I should be focusing on myself instead of jumping into another relationship." "Do you think you're moving too fast?" "I don't know. Maybe. We've been dating for what, 2 months? And I'm already spending half my time here getting attached to your daughter, thinking about you constantly." She stopped, looking frustrated. "This doesn't feel fast when I'm with you. It feels right. But then my mother says things like, 'Remember what happened last time,' and I start spiraling." Caleb moved closer but didn't touch her yet, giving her space to work through it. "What does 'remember what happened last time' mean?" "It means I married young and it failed. It means I have a track record of committing to the wrong people and wasting years trying to make it work. It means maybe I can't trust my own judgment about relationships." "That's not fair to you. You were 19 when you married David. You're 43 now. You've learned things, grown. You're not the same person." "Aren't I, though? Because I'm falling for someone again, getting invested, making space in my life for another person who could decide one day that I'm not enough." The words landed like stones, and Caleb felt the weight of them. This wasn't really about her mother or timing or moving too fast. This was about fear, the bone-deep terror of being left again. "Come here," he said softly. Hannah hesitated, then moved into his arms. He held her close, feeling the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together through sheer will. "I'm not going to stand here and promise I'll never hurt you," Caleb said quietly. "That would be lying. People hurt each other, even when they're trying not to. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere. That I'm choosing this, choosing us, every single day. And I need you to tell me if you're still choosing it too, or if your mother's words are changing how you feel." Hannah pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm still choosing it. That's what scares me. I want this so much, and wanting things that much has never ended well for me. It ended badly once, with someone who made you feel small and dismissed your passions and needed you to be something you're not. That's not what this is." "How do you know? How can you be sure?" "Because I see you, Hannah. All of you. The parts that are steady and competent, and the parts that are scared and uncertain. The way you light up talking about libraries, and the way you get quiet when you're processing something difficult. I see all of it, and I'm not asking you to change any of it." "What if I can't do this? What if I'm too damaged from my marriage to build something healthy?" Caleb cupped her face in his hands, making her meet his eyes. "You're not damaged. You're careful. And there's nothing wrong with being careful as long as it doesn't become paralysis. You can be scared and still move forward. You can protect yourself and still let people in. It doesn't have to be all or nothing." Hannah closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "My therapist says the same thing, that I keep thinking in extremes. Either I'm completely independent and don't need anyone, or I'm completely dependent and lose myself in the relationship. She says I need to find the middle ground." "Your therapist sounds smart." "She is. I've been seeing her since the divorce, trying to figure out who I am outside of being someone's wife." Hannah opened her eyes. "I never told you that."
About therapy. Why would you need to? Lots of people go to therapy.
I probably should have after my ex left, but I was too busy just surviving to think about processing.
Do you think less of me? For needing help? I think more of you. It takes courage to admit you need support and then actually seek it out. That's strength, not weakness. Something in Hannah's expression softened. Why are you so good at this? It's saying exactly what I need to hear? I'm not good at it. I'm just honest. And I care about you enough to think before I speak. Hannah kissed him then, and Caleb tasted salt from her tears mixed with something sweeter, relief maybe, or trust starting to override fear. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. I'm sorry, she whispered, for bringing my baggage into this, for letting my mother get in my head. Don't apologize for having feelings. That's what people do. They have complicated families and old wounds and moments of doubt. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. I just don't want to mess this up. You and Mia, you're the best thing that's happened to me in years, maybe ever. You're not going to mess it up by being honest about what you're feeling. That's actually the only way to not mess it up. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while the winter darkness pressed against the windows and the house settled into evening quiet. Finally, Hannah pulled back with a shaky laugh. We were supposed to watch that movie tonight. I'm completely derailing the evening with my anxiety. The movie will wait. You're more important than a movie. Still, I came here to spend time with you, not spiral about my mother's opinions. We can do both. Multitasking. That earned him a real smile. They migrated to the couch, Hannah curling into Caleb's side while some action movie neither of them were really watching played on the television. But the physical closeness seemed to settle something for her, and gradually Caleb felt the tension drain from her body. Can I ask you something? Hannah said during a particularly loud explosion scene. Always. Do you ever worry about me and Mia, about what happens if we don't work out and she gets hurt? Caleb had thought about it, of course, late-night thoughts that came with single-parent territory. I worry about it sometimes, but I also trust Mia to be resilient. She's been through her mother leaving. She knows people come and go, and I think keeping her away from relationships entirely sends the message that love isn't worth the risk. That's very evolved of you. I'm making it up as I go, same as everyone else. But I've watched her with you, how she lights up when you come over, how she asks when she'll see you next, how she started including you in her stories about her day. You make her happy. That matters more than protecting her from hypothetical future pain. What if I'm not good at this? At being part of her life in a significant way? You're already doing it. You ask about her interests, you listen when she talks, you treat her like a person instead of an obstacle. That's literally all it takes. It feels like it should be more complicated than that. Most things are simpler than we think. We just make them complicated because simple feels too vulnerable. Hannah was quiet for a moment, then said, I love how you see the world. Like everything can be figured out if you just approach it honestly and pay attention. That's woodworking translated to life philosophy. Measure twice, cut once, and listen to what the material is telling you. Does the material ever tell you you're wrong? Constantly. That's how you learn. The movie ended without either of them noticing. They stayed on the couch talking until well past midnight, Hannah opening up about her fears around commitment, Caleb sharing his own doubts about whether he was capable of being a good partner after years of focusing solely on Mia. The conversation wound through heavy topics and light ones, serious confessions and small observations, creating a tapestry of intimacy that felt more valuable than any dramatic declaration. Around 1 a.m, Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. She glanced at it, made a face, and silenced the phone without responding. You don't have to ignore her on my account, Caleb said. I'm not. I'm ignoring her because I'm an adult who gets to decide what advice I take and what I discard. She means well, but her fear doesn't get to dictate my choices. Hannah set the phone face down on the coffee table with finality. I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to be scared and try anyway. She'll have to accept that. Will she? Eventually. Or she won't, and I'll have to accept that. Either way, I'm not letting her fear become my fear anymore. Caleb pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. I'm proud of you. For what? Deciding to stop letting my mother run my life? For choosing yourself. For choosing what you want instead of what's safest.
That takes courage. Hannah tilted her head back to look at him. You make it sound noble. Mostly it just feels terrifying. It can be both. They stayed up talking until Hannah's eyes started drooping, and Caleb realized the responsible thing was to send her home before she fell asleep on his couch. Walking her out to her car, the December air sharp and cold, felt harder than it should have. Text me when you get home? He asked. Always do. And Hannah? Your mother is wrong. You're not repeating old patterns. You're building something new. Don't let her convince you otherwise. Hannah kissed him, quick and soft. Thank you. For tonight. For listening. For not running when I get in my own head. Never running. That's the deal. He watched her drive away, then headed back inside to a house that felt emptier without her in it. The realization should have been concerning, how quickly he'd gotten used to her presence, how much he missed her after she'd been gone for 5 minutes. But instead of fear, Caleb felt something closer to certainty. This was right. They were right. Everything else was just noise. December rolled forward with the relentless momentum of approaching holidays. Caleb finished the professor's bookshelf and started a commission for a lawyer's office, a conference table that would seat 12 and needed to project authority without being oppressive. The work was demanding, the timeline tight, and he found himself pulling late nights in the workshop more often than not. Hannah understood, which somehow made it both easier and harder. She'd stop by with dinner on nights when he was working late, sitting in his workshop reading or grading library program proposals while he shaped wood and assembled joints. Sometimes they'd barely talk for hours, but the companionship felt as valuable as conversation. You're going to wear yourself out, she said one evening, watching him sand a particularly stubborn section of walnut. It's a big commission, big enough to cover Christmas and 3 months of slow season. That's wonderful, but you still need to sleep occasionally. I sleep when Mia sleeps. Dad rules. Caleb, you look exhausted. He set down the sandpaper, straightening and feeling every vertebra protest. I am exhausted, but I'm also 3 weeks from deadline and only halfway done. I don't really have a choice. Hannah stood, walking over to where he stood. She placed her hands on his shoulders, her thumbs working at the knots in his muscles with surprising strength. Tell me what I can do to help. You're already helping. Being here, bringing food, not making me feel guilty about working all the time. That's the bare minimum of being a decent human. I want to actually help. There's not much anyone can do. Custom carpentry is kind of a solo endeavor. What about prep work? Measuring, organizing, keeping track of pieces? I can follow instructions. Caleb turned to face her. You want to help me build a conference table? I want to spend time with you, and you're spending time building a conference table. Therefore, I want to help build a conference table. The logic is sound. You have your own job, your own life. You don't need to spend your evenings in my workshop. I know I don't need to. I want to. There's a difference. Hannah's expression turned serious. Let me in, Caleb. Let me be part of this part of your life too. Not just the easy parts, the work parts, the stressed parts, the I'm running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee parts. He studied her face, looking for hesitation or obligation, and found only sincerity. You're serious. Completely serious. Put me to work. So he did. Hannah became his workshop assistant, learning to read his abbreviated sketches, keeping track of which pieces went where, holding board steady while he cut, fetching tools without being asked twice. She wasn't naturally skilled with her hands the way Caleb was, but she was patient and methodical and willing to ask questions when she didn't understand. Working together created its own intimacy. Caleb found himself explaining his process, articulating instincts he'd never put into words before. Hannah asked intelligent questions about joinery techniques and wood properties, genuinely interested in understanding the craft beyond just helping. Why walnut for this but cherry for the bookshelf? She asked one night while organizing his hardware drawer, a task that had needed doing for approximately 2 years. Cherry ages beautifully, gets richer and darker over time. The professor wanted something that would improve with age, like his books. Walnut is more dramatic from the start. The lawyers wanted immediate impact. So you're choosing wood based on what the client values? And what the piece needs to communicate. Furniture is language. Different woods say different things. Hannah paused in her organizing, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What would you build me if I commissioned something from you? The question caught Caleb off guard. What would you want? I'm asking what you'd choose, based on who I am, what you know about me. What wood speaks my language? Caleb considered it seriously, walking through his mental catalog of available lumber. Maple, quarter sawn, so the grain is subtle but complex. Blonde, with occasional bird's eye figuring. Why maple? Because it's strong without being showy, reliable, but not boring. It has depth if you look closely, but doesn't demand attention. And it takes detail work beautifully. You can do intricate joinery and the wood showcases it instead of overwhelming it. He met her eyes. Like you, strong and subtle and worth looking at closely. Hannah's expression softened. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and it's about lumber. I'm a carpenter. It's kind of my love language. I'm beginning to understand that. They worked until nearly midnight, making significant progress on the table base assembly. When Hannah finally headed home, Caleb found himself missing her before her car was out of the driveway. His phone buzzed a few minutes later. Hannah. Made it home. Thank you for letting me help. I like seeing you in your element. Caleb typed back. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. You're better at this than you think. Hannah. I have a good teacher. Sleep well. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow meant dinner with Mia, a standing Tuesday arrangement they'd fallen into without formally discussing it. Hannah had become a fixture in their routine so naturally that Caleb sometimes forgot there was a time before her presence felt inevitable. The next evening, Mia greeted Hannah at the door with a drawing she'd made at school, a family portrait that included Caleb, Mia, Hannah, and approximately 17 cats of varying sizes. Why are there so many cats? Hannah asked, studying the artwork seriously. Because Grandma says Dad's going to have cats when I grow up, so I wanted to show what our family will look like with all of us and the cats. Our family, Caleb repeated carefully. Mia looked at him like he was being deliberately dense. Yes, Dad. Our family? You, me, and Hannah, and the future cats. Hannah caught Caleb's eye over Mia's head, her expression a mix of surprise and something deeper, hope maybe, or recognition of a threshold being crossed. I think we should definitely have cats, Hannah said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. 17 might be excessive, but we can negotiate. 15? Mia offered. How about we start with the people part and see about cats later? Caleb suggested, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. Fine, but I'm saving this drawing so when we get cats, we remember it was my idea. She ran off to put the drawing on the refrigerator, leaving Caleb and Hannah standing in the entryway processing what had just happened. She included me in her family portrait, Hannah said quietly. She did. That feels significant. It is significant. Hannah looked at him, vulnerable and uncertain. Is it too much? Too fast? Should I talk to her about... No. Caleb took her hand. It's not too fast, it's honest. She feels what she feels, and she's expressing it the way kids do, directly and without filters. We can't tell her not to care about you just because we're scared of what it means. What does it mean? It means this is real. What we're building. Real enough that my 6-year-old daughter has accepted you as part of her world. That's not something to back away from. That's something to honor. Hannah's eyes were bright. I care about her so much. More than I expected to, more than I probably should after only a few months. There's no should with feelings. You care about her because she's easy to care about. And she cares about you because you show up and you're present and you treat her like she matters. That's all any of us can ask for. What if I mess this up? What if I hurt her or disappoint her or... Caleb pulled Hannah close, cutting off the spiral before it could fully form. You're going to make mistakes. So am I. So will Mia. That's part of being in relationship with people. What matters is that you care enough to try, and that when you do mess up, you own it and work to do better. That's all any of us can do. Hannah held on to him tightly, her face pressed against his shoulder. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. Both of you. And it's terrifying. Caleb's breath caught. He pulled back just enough to see her face. I'm falling in love with you too. Have been for weeks. Maybe since that first coffee date when you called Lakeside Cafe objectively terrible. Hannah laughed, wet and shaky. That's when you knew? That's when I started suspecting. I knew for sure when you showed up crying in my driveway and trusted me to help instead of handling it alone. That's when I realized you were someone I could build a life with. We're really doing this, aren't we? Building a life together. If you want to. If you're still choosing this. I'm choosing this. I'm terrified and uncertain and probably going to spiral occasionally, but I'm choosing this. Hannah kissed him, soft and certain. I'm choosing you. From the kitchen, Mia called out, "Are you guys kissing again? Because dinner's getting cold and I'm hungry." They broke apart laughing, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest, a rightness that felt like the final piece of a complicated puzzle clicking into place. Dinner was chaotic and warm, Mia chattering about her day while Hannah and Caleb exchanged glances across the table that said everything words couldn't. After Mia went to bed, they sat on the couch, not watching another movie, Hannah's head on Caleb's shoulder, both of them quiet with the comfortable silence of people who'd said everything that needed saying. "I should go," Hannah said eventually, though she made no move to stand. "You could stay," Caleb offered. "Guest room is made up. Save you the drive home." Hannah lifted her head to look at him. "Is that okay? With Mia?" "Mia would be thrilled. She asks when you're moving in approximately every other day." "Moving in?" Hannah's voice pitched higher. "I tell her we're not there yet, but she's persistent. Apparently she's been planning room arrangements." "That's..." Hannah paused, searching for words. "Actually really sweet." "It is. Also mildly terrifying in how seriously she takes it. She's made spreadsheets." "She's 6. How does she know how to make spreadsheets?" "Rachel taught her. I'm as concerned as you are." Hannah laughed, and the tension broke. "Okay, I'll stay. But just because it's late and I'm tired, not because I'm moving in." Noted. Caleb lent her clothes to sleep in, a t-shirt and sweatpants that were comically large on her frame. Watching her pad around his house in his clothes, hair down and face scrubbed clean of makeup, felt more intimate than anything that had come before. "Bathrooms down the hall, towels in the cabinet if you want to shower in the morning," he said, trying to be practical while his brain was short-circuiting over how domestic this all felt. "Thank you." Hannah paused at the guest room door. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not freaking out when Mia included me in her family drawing, for not making it weird or backing away." "Why would I back away from something I want?" "I don't know. Fear, self-protection, all the usual reasons people run when things get real." "I spent 3 years running from anything that felt like vulnerability. I'm done running, especially from something this good." Hannah crossed the space between them and kissed him, slow and deep, in the hallway of his small cabin with Mia sleeping down the hall and the December wind rattling the windows. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Hannah." He lay awake in his own bed for a long time after, listening to the quiet sounds of Hannah settling in the guest room, processing the enormity of what had shifted that evening. Mia's casual inclusion of Hannah in their family, Hannah's declaration of love, the easy way she'd agreed to stay, as if this was already her home too. It was too fast by conventional standards. Too much too soon. But Caleb had learned that conventional standards were written by people who'd never had to rebuild their entire lives from scratch. When you'd already lost everything once, you learned to recognize what mattered when it showed up. And Hannah mattered. Outside, snow started falling, the first real snow of the season, thick and steady. Caleb watched it through his bedroom window and let himself imagine future winters, Hannah staying more nights than she left. Mia's collection of family drawings growing to include real moments instead of just hopes. Building something permanent with someone who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. The fear was still there, constant and insistent, whispering about all the ways this could go wrong. But underneath the fear was something stronger, trust, hope, the quiet certainty that some risks were worth taking. Caleb closed his eyes and let himself believe it. Let himself imagine a future that included more than just survival and responsibility. A future with partnership and love, and maybe, eventually, a few of those hypothetical cats Mia kept planning for.
Tomorrow he'd wake up to Hannah in his guest room and Mia probably already planning breakfast. Tomorrow they'd navigate the careful dance of integrating lives and managing expectations and figuring out what this new configuration of family looked like. But tonight, he just let himself feel grateful for second chances, for blind dates that became something real, for careful people finding the courage to try anyway. Snow continued falling outside, blanketing the woods around his cabin in quiet white. Inside, two people he loved were sleeping, and Caleb finally let himself rest too, trusting that whatever came next, they'd figure it out together. That, he thought, as sleep finally claimed him, was more than enough. Morning arrived with Mia's delighted shriek from the kitchen. Caleb stumbled out of bed to find his daughter and Hannah making pancakes together. Or more accurately, Mia was directing operations while Hannah followed instructions with the careful attention of someone defusing a bomb. 3 chocolate chips per pancake, not 4, Mia was saying. 4 makes them too sweet. Got it. 3 exactly. Hannah caught sight of Caleb in the doorway and smiled. Good morning. Your daughter is a very exacting sous chef. She gets it from her grandfather. He measures everything twice and still doesn't trust the results. That's called quality control, Dad, Mia said without looking up from her chocolate chip arrangement. Grandpa taught me that precision matters. They ate breakfast together, the 3 of them crowded around Caleb's small kitchen table, and it felt so natural that Caleb had to remind himself this was new. That 3 months ago, breakfast had been just him and Mia, rushing through cereal before school. Now Hannah was here in his 2 big sweatpants, laughing at Mia's stories about her friend Emma's attempt to bring a frog to show and tell. And it felt like she'd always been here. After breakfast, Hannah reluctantly headed home to change for work, but not before Mia extracted a promise that she'd come back for dinner. The moment her car disappeared down the driveway, Mia turned to Caleb with an expression of profound seriousness. You're going to marry her, right? Caleb nearly dropped the plate he was washing. What? Hannah. You're going to marry her. That's what people do when they love each other and want to be a family. Mia, we've only been dating a few months. So? Aunt Rachel says, when you know, and you know, I can tell. How can you tell? Because you smile different now. Like you're happy inside, not just outside. And you talk about her all the time. And you made her that special cutting board with the fancy wood, even though she didn't ask for it. Caleb had indeed made Hannah a cutting board from the quarter-sawn maple he'd described to her, with an inlaid border of walnut. He'd given it to her last week, watching her face light up as she understood the significance of the wood choice. I care about her very much, Caleb said carefully, but marriage is a big step. It's not something you rush into. Grandma says you're too careful about everything, that you think too much and feel too little. Grandma needs to stop psychoanalyzing me to my 6-year-old daughter. She's not wrong, though. Mia climbed onto a stool, swinging her legs. You're scared because Mom left, but Hannah's not Mom. She's better. The casual brutality of childhood honesty never failed to stun Caleb. It's not that simple, kiddo. Why not? You love her, she loves you, she loves me. We all love each other. That's literally what families are made of. Mia tilted her head, studying him. Or are you waiting for her to mess up, to prove she's going to leave like Mom did? Caleb sat down heavily on the stool next to his daughter, feeling like the child in this conversation. Maybe a little bit. Is that bad? It's sad. Because Hannah's really nice and she makes you happy, and you should probably tell her that before she thinks you don't want her enough. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't always listen. Mia patted his hand with the condescension of a tiny guru. Talk to her, Dad. Grown-ups always say kids should use their words, but then you don't use yours when it matters. Caleb pulled Mia into a hug, overwhelmed by how much this small person understood. I love you. You know that? I know. I love you too. Now can we go to the park? Emma's mom said she'd be there, and I want to show her my new jacket. The December weeks accelerated toward the holidays with the momentum of a freight train. Caleb finished the conference table commission with 2 days to spare, delivered it to effusive praise, and a bonus that made him feel slightly less anxious about January's sparse project calendar. Hannah organized a community tool library workshop at the library, and Caleb found himself teaching basic carpentry to a room full of enthusiastic amateurs who wanted to learn to build birdhouses.
They spent Christmas Eve at Caleb's parents' house, a chaotic gathering of extended family that Hannah navigated with impressive grace. Derek cornered Caleb in the kitchen while Hannah was helping Mia decorate cookies with Rachel. "So," Derek said, leaning against the counter with studied casualness. "Things are serious. Things are good." "That's not what I asked." Caleb looked through the doorway at Hannah, who was laughing at something Mia had said, cookie frosting on her nose. "Yeah, things are serious." "Good serious or scary serious?" "Both, mostly good." Derek was quiet for a moment, then said, "Rachel thinks you're going to propose. I told her it's too soon, but she's convinced." "It's definitely too soon." "Is it though? You've been basically living together for weeks. Mia calls her family. You look at Hannah the way I look at Rachel when she does literally anything." Derek paused. "I'm not saying rush it. I'm just saying don't let fear make you wait so long that you miss the moment." "What moment?" "The moment when waiting stops being careful and starts being self-sabotage. The moment when she starts wondering if you're really all in or just comfortable." Derek clapped him on the shoulder. "You're all in, brother. I can see it. Make sure she can see it too." The conversation sat with Caleb through Christmas dinner, through present opening and dessert, and the long drive home with Mia asleep in the back seat. Hannah had gone to her own family's gathering, and Caleb found himself missing her with an intensity that felt disproportionate to the 12 hours they'd been apart. His phone buzzed as he was carrying Mia to bed. "Hannah, survived family dinner. My mother asked pointed questions about you for 2 straight hours. I may have told her to back off in front of my aunt and 3 cousins." Caleb smiled, tucking Mia in before responding, "How'd that go?" "Hannah, she was appalled. My aunt was delighted. Overall a win." "How was your evening?" Caleb, "Good, loud. Derek thinks I should propose to you." He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then immediately regretted it as 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, disappeared again for a full 2 minutes. Finally, "What do you think?" Caleb stared at the message, heart pounding. This was the moment Derek had talked about, the moment when careful became cowardice. He could deflect, make a joke, walk it back to safe territory. Or he could be honest. "Caleb, I think I've been carving a ring box late at night after Mia goes to sleep. I think I've been imagining what forever looks like with you. I think I'm terrified and certain in equal measure." The dots appeared and stayed this time. Then, "Can I come over?" Caleb, "Now? It's almost midnight." Hannah, "Now, please." 20 minutes later, Hannah pulled into his driveway. Caleb met her on the porch, and she climbed out of her car still wearing the dress she'd worn to her family dinner, her coat thrown on over it, her hair windblown from the drive. "You're making me a ring box," she said without preamble. "I am, am." Caleb shoved his hands in his pockets, suddenly uncertain. "I didn't mean to spring that on you over text. That was poor planning. Show me." "What?" "The ring box. Show me." Caleb led her to his workshop, flipping on lights and heading to the far workbench where he'd hidden the box under a canvas drop cloth. He pulled it out slowly, holding it in both hands like an offering. The box was small, made from the same quarter-sawn maple he'd used for her cutting board, with a walnut inlay on the lid in the shape of an open book. The grain was perfect, the joints invisible, the finish smooth as glass. Inside he'd lined it with deep blue velvet. "It's not done," he said as Hannah took it from him with careful hands. "I need to adjust the hinge and add the final finish coat, and there's no ring yet because I wasn't sure, I didn't know if—" "It's perfect," Hannah whispered, running her fingers over the book inlay. "A book. Because of the library. Because you said books stay when people leave. Because they're permanent and reliable and safe." Caleb took a breath, forcing himself to say the rest. "Because I want to be those things for you. Permanent and reliable and safe. A place you can always come back to." Hannah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Caleb, I know it's fast. No, I know we've only been together a few months. I know all the practical reasons we should wait. Let more time pass. Make sure it's real. Protect ourselves from getting hurt again." He stepped closer, taking her free hand in his. "But I also know that I've never been more certain of anything. That you're the person I want to build a life with.
that Mia loves you and you love her, and together we make something better than any of us could be alone. I'm scared, Hannah said, her voice breaking. I'm so scared of messing this up, of not being enough, of waking up one day and realizing I've made another mistake. This isn't a mistake. You're not making the same choice you made at 19. You're making a completely different choice with completely different information. Caleb cupped her face in his free hand, making her look at him. I see you, Hannah. All of you. The scared parts and the strong parts and everything in between. And I'm choosing all of it, every single day. What if I can't do this? What if I'm too damaged? Stop. You're not damaged. You're careful and thoughtful, and you've learned from your past instead of letting it define you. That's not damage. That's wisdom. Hannah clutched the ring box to her chest, breathing hard. I don't have an answer yet. I don't know if I can say yes. I'm not asking yet, not officially. I just needed you to know that I'm building towards something, that this isn't casual for me, that when I think about my future, you're in it. Caleb smiled, brushing away her tears with his thumb. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. You really made me a ring box. I really did. With a book on it. With a book on it. Hannah laughed, wet and shaky, and kissed him. The ring box pressed between them, tangible proof of intention and hope, and all the terrifying possibilities of forever.
They stood in his workshop for a long time, holding each other while the December wind rattled the windows and the space heater hummed in the corner. Finally, Hannah pulled back, wiping her eyes. I should go home. Process. Think. Okay. But I'm taking this with me. She held up the ring box. If that's okay. It's yours. That's the whole point. Hannah kissed him again, quick and fierce. I love you. Even when I'm scared, even when I'm uncertain, I love you. I need you to know that. I know I love you too. He walked her to her car, watched her drive away, clutching the maple box like a lifeline. Back in his workshop, Caleb stood staring at the space where the box had been, wondering if he'd just made the bravest or stupidest decision of his life. His phone buzzed. Hannah, thank you for being patient with me, for understanding that I need time to trust this. You're the best thing that's happened to me in longer than I can remember. Caleb smiled, typing back, take all the time you need. I'll be here. The next 3 weeks were strange and wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Hannah didn't mention the ring box, and Caleb didn't ask. They continued their routine, dinners together, weekends with Mia, quiet evenings in his workshop. But there was a new weight to everything, an awareness of futures being decided in small daily choices. Hannah started keeping a toothbrush at the cabin, then spare clothes. Then half her book collection migrated to Caleb's shelves with the casual inevitability of continental drift. By mid-January, she was staying over more nights than not, and Mia had stopped asking when Hannah was moving in and started asking where she should put her extensive cat planning documentation when Hannah's desk arrived. We don't have Hannah's desk yet, Caleb pointed out one Saturday morning. But we will, Mia said, with the certainty of someone who'd seen the future and found it acceptable. Because Hannah's basically already living here, she just hasn't admitted it yet. She wasn't wrong. Hannah had been there for breakfast every morning that week. Her coffee mug had a permanent spot in the cabinet. Her jacket hung by the door. The guest room had quietly transformed into Hannah's room, though she still apologetically referred to it as borrowing space. On a cold Tuesday evening in late January, Caleb was finishing up paperwork for a new commission when Hannah appeared in the workshop doorway holding the maple ring box. Can we talk? She asked. Caleb's heart stopped, then started again too fast. Of course. She sat down on the worn stool by his workbench, setting the box between them. I've been carrying this around for almost a month, looking at it every night before I go to sleep, trying to figure out if I'm brave enough to say yes to what it represents. Hannah, let me finish. She took a breath, steadying herself. I've spent 4 years building a life alone, proving to myself and everyone else that I didn't need a partner to be complete. And I'm complete on my own, but I'm also better with you, happier, more myself somehow, even though that doesn't make logical sense. Caleb waited, barely breathing. I'm terrified of marriage, terrified of promising forever when forever went so wrong the first time. terrified of losing myself again, of becoming someone's wife instead of my own person. Hannah's hands were shaking. But I'm more terrified of letting fear make my decisions, of looking back in 10 years and realizing I walked away from the best thing in my life because I was too scared to try. What are you saying? Hannah picked up the ring box, opening it slowly. The blue velvet interior was empty, waiting. I'm saying I don't need you to ask me yet. I'm not ready for that. But I'm ready to admit that I want you to ask me. Eventually. When we're both ready. When the timing is right. Caleb felt something unlock in his chest. Yeah? Yeah. I'm ready to admit that I want forever with you. That I want to be Mia's stepmom, not just Dad's girlfriend. That I want my desk in your cabin and our books mixed on the shelves and all the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of building a life together. Are you sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Hannah set down the box, reaching for his hands. I spent my whole first marriage trying to be someone I wasn't. With you, I'm just me, scared and careful and sometimes overthinking everything, and that's enough. You make that enough. Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. You're more than enough. You're everything. They stayed like that for a long time, and when they finally pulled apart, Hannah was smiling through tears. So we're doing this, she said, building a life together, taking it slow but moving forward. We're doing this. I think I need to officially move in. Mia's threatening to create organizational charts if I don't make a decision soon. Caleb laughed. She's been planning your office space for weeks. She has a 3-ring binder. Of course she does. They told Mia over dinner that night, though it was less telling and more confirming what she'd already assumed. Her response was to present them with a detailed moving timeline she'd created with Rachel's help, complete with color-coded tasks and deadlines. You've been planning this, Caleb said, staring at the document. Obviously, someone has to be organized around here. Mia looked at Hannah seriously. Does this mean I can call you Mom? Because Aunt Rachel says I should ask first, but Emma says you just start doing it and eventually everyone gets used to it. Hannah's breath caught. She looked at Caleb, who nodded slightly, then turned back to Mia. You can call me whatever feels right to you. If that's Mom, then yes. If it's Hannah, that's okay too. There's no wrong answer. I think Mom, Mia decided, but the good kind of mom, not the kind who leaves, the kind who stays and makes pancakes and helps with homework even when it's boring. I can definitely be that kind of mom, Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. Mia nodded, satisfied, and returned her attention to her organizational binder. Good. Now about the moving timeline. I think we should start with books because they're heaviest, then clothes, then maybe we let the actual adults handle the logistics, Caleb suggested. Have the actual adults been planning this for 6 weeks with contingency schedules and backup plans? No, they've been making hard eyes at each other and being all emotional. Someone has to be practical. Hannah laughed, bright and free, and Caleb felt the last piece of his carefully constructed walls crumble. This was his life now, a precocious 6-year-old with organizational binders and a woman who'd chosen to stay despite every reason fear gave her to run. This was his family. Hannah moved in gradually over the next 2 weeks, her belongings integrating into the cabin with surprising ease. Her books filled empty shelves, her desk fit perfectly in the corner of the living room that had always felt too empty. Her presence transformed the space from Caleb's house into their home. On a Saturday in early February, Caleb found himself in his workshop with Mia while Hannah was at work. They were supposed to be organizing hardware, but Mia had other plans. When are you going to propose? She asked, sorting screws with the intense focus she brought to everything. I don't know. When it feels right. It feels right now. It's been feeling right for weeks. You're just overthinking it. It's a big decision. Overthinking is appropriate. Mia set down the screws, turning to face him with an expression that was far too knowing for 6 years old. You're scared she'll say no. Maybe a little. She won't. She loves you. She loves us. She moved in. She calls this home. What more proof do you need? It's not about proof. It's about timing. Making sure we're both ready. Dad? Mia put her small hand over his. She's ready. You're ready. You're just waiting for some perfect moment that doesn't exist.
Sometimes you just have to be brave. From the mouths of babes, Caleb thought. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You're just finally listening. That night, after Mia was asleep and Hannah was reading on the couch, Caleb found himself pulling out the ring he'd bought 2 weeks ago. A simple platinum band with a small sapphire. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that would get in her way when she was working. He'd been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. Maybe Mia was right.
Maybe the right moment was just any moment when you chose to be brave. Hannah, he said, setting down the book he'd been pretending to read. She looked up, smiling. Remember when you said you weren't ready for me to ask yet? Her smile faltered slightly. Yes? Are you ready now? Hannah set down her own book slowly, her eyes widening as Caleb pulled out the small velvet box, not the maple one that was for display, but a traditional jeweler's box that held the actual ring. Caleb, he moved to kneel in front of her, hands shaking slightly. I know this is fast by some standards. I know we've only been together 6 months. I know all the practical reasons to wait longer. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build furniture and raise Mia and eventually get some of those hypothetical cats she keeps planning for. I want all of it with you starting now. Hannah was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm not asking you to lose yourself or change or become smaller. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, with me, forever. To build a partnership based on honesty and trust and showing up even when it's hard. He opened the box, revealing the sapphire ring. Will you marry me? Hannah stared at the ring, then at Caleb, then back at the ring. For a moment that felt like an eternity, she didn't speak. Then she laughed, bright and joyful and free. Yes, God, yes, 1,000 times yes. Caleb's hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the ring on her finger, but finally it slid into place, fitting perfectly. Hannah pulled him up from his knees and kissed him, deep and certain, and Caleb felt everything he'd been holding back flood through him, relief and joy and love so intense it almost hurt. I love you, Hannah said against his mouth. I'm still scared, but I love you and I choose you and I'm saying yes. I love you too. So much. They sat together on the couch, Hannah admiring her ring while Caleb held her close, both of them processing the enormity of what they'd just committed to. Mia's going to lose her mind, Hannah said. She's been planning this for months. She has a wedding binder. Of course she does. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Mia's door creaked open. Small footsteps padded down the hall, and she appeared in the living room doorway, rubbing her eyes. Did you propose yet? She asked sleepily. How did you... Caleb started. I've been waiting for you to be brave. I heard you talking. She walked over to where they sat, climbing onto the couch between them. Did she say yes? She said yes, Hannah confirmed, showing Mia the ring. Good. Now we can start planning the wedding. I have ideas. Mia yawned, curling into Hannah's side. Can I be the flower girl? And can we have cake that's chocolate with chocolate frosting? And can we get a cat after the wedding? We'll discuss the cat, Caleb said. That means yes. When adults say, we'll discuss it, it means yes, but they want to pretend they're being responsible. Hannah laughed, her arm around Mia, her other hand clasped in Caleb's. You've got us all figured out, don't you? Mostly. You're not that complicated. You love each other and you love me and you want to be a family. Everything else is just details. Out of the mouths of babes, Caleb thought again. Because she was right. Stripped of fear and doubt and overthinking, it really was that simple. They sat there together, Caleb, Hannah, and Mia, on the couch in their small cabin while winter wind rattled the windows, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility. The story that had started with a blind date Caleb almost skipped had become something real and permanent and beautiful. We should go to bed, Hannah said eventually. It's late and we all have early mornings. But none of them moved. They stayed there together, Mia falling asleep between them, Hannah's ring catching the lamplight, Caleb's heart finally at peace. Later, after they'd carried Mia to bed and were getting ready for sleep themselves, Hannah caught Caleb's hand. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? for being patient while I figured out how to trust this, for not rushing me, but also not letting me run away, for building something worth saying yes to. Thank you for saying yes, for choosing to be brave even when you were terrified, for becoming part of our family. Hannah kissed him, soft and sweet. I can't wait to marry you. How does June sound? Give us time to plan, but not so long we overthink it. June sounds perfect. Fair warning, though, Mia's going to want to be heavily involved in the planning. She's already made a binder. We never had a choice. They climbed into bed together, Hannah fitting perfectly against Caleb's side. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Caleb felt completely at peace. No fear, no doubt, no waiting for the other shoe to drop, just quiet certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. I love you, he murmured into Hannah's hair. I love you too, she whispered back. Thank you for not giving up on us. Never. You're stuck with me now. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. Outside, February snow fell soft and steady, blanketing their small clearing in white. Inside, 3 people who'd chosen each other despite every reason fear gave them not to slept peacefully, building toward a future none of them could have imagined 6 months ago. The blind date that became coffee, that became dinners, that became love, that became family. The joke that almost didn't happen, but became the best decision Caleb had ever made. The careful, scared people who found courage in each other and built something permanent from hope and honesty and showing up every single day. This was their story. And it was only just beginning.